Okay, so welcome everybody to the AI in the Clinic network event. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much to our speakers for joining us. It feels a little strange to me that I can't see you and I'm looking at my usual computer screen, but anyway, here we go. So yeah, this is the network event for the project AI in the Clinic. And this project was seed funded by the Wellcome Trust in a themed call for AI in healthcare, the ethical and social implications and aspects of AI in healthcare. It began in February 2019, and due to the pandemic, it was extended to the end of this month, and this is in fact its final event. And I do thank you all for joining us, especially seeing as this is a Friday afternoon, but this did enable us to gather together more people from across the world. I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about the project. First of all, I'm Anna Maria Carusi. I was the PI on this project, and Pete Winter worked alongside me on the project. We, in fact, had a very interdisciplinary team. I'm a philosopher and sociologist of science, and Pete is the sociology of science and technology. And our collaborators were mostly in the pulmonary vascular diseases unit at Sheffield Hospital. And they included a very multidisciplinary group of people, including clinicians, clinician radiologists, and we also had biomedical researchers on board and a consultant nurse. And we also had collaborators in computer science, and our collaborators were both in academia and in industry on the computer science and data science front. And we also had a very multidisciplinary steering committee. The disease area that we were studying, because our fieldwork was done with the pulmonary vascular diseases unit, and what we were looking at was how they were deploying or hoping to deploy, developing AI to use for the early diagnosis of pulmonary hypertension. And it's a very particular disease, and we thought that it would be a good idea just to tell you a little bit about that to fill in the background. It's a rare and very serious disease. In 2019, there were just 7,000 people in the UK diagnosed with it. But for those who are diagnosed with it, obviously it has extremely serious implications. The Pulmonary Hypertension Association UK reported that 48% of patients would have waited over a year to be diagnosed after first experiencing symptoms, and about 10% of patients take over 3 years to be diagnosed from the onset of symptoms. So early diagnosis is crucial for improving the quality of life and increasing life expectancy. But early diagnosis remains a major challenge. So our project was going to be looking at how artificial intelligence would be deployed in this area against this background of the need for early diagnosis. And we know that there's a discourse around artificial intelligence in healthcare that frames it as non-human, as an artificial form of intelligence, or a machine that learns. But it is often also classified and mythologized as a kind of a supernova. It's a very powerful technology that can detect, classify, or diagnose disease in a way that's comparable to or better than healthcare experts. It's claimed to be more accurate than humans and faster than humans. And it's claimed also that it does its work with less bias and prejudice than humans. So in many ways, AI becomes kind of mythologized as a kind of supernova. What we wanted to show, in fact that when we looked at it, in fact, there's a much lower uptake of artificial intelligence in healthcare contexts than one would think from the media hype around it. So, for example, only 11% of the top of the 100 top publications in medical artificial intelligence actually collaborate or include clinical studies. And only 6 out of 8,302 publications on medical artificial intelligence were tested in real-world clinical environments. And these very, very low numbers that we see in the papers reflect that, in fact, there's quite a low actual embedding of artificial intelligence in clinical settings. Sorry, there seems to have happened to my slides. Just one moment, please. I'll just go back to that. They've just sort of stuck. Right. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So our the first aim of our project was to explore the development process of 3 AI applications for the early diagnosis of this rare disease. The first one that we looked at was a screening algorithm, which was based on data acquired from hospital episode statistics. The second was a biomarker algorithm using biomarker data. And the third one was the tensor algorithm using imaging data. And on this part of the work of the research, we did qualitative research using participant observation and interviews. For the second aim of our project was to see what issues need attention for the responsible research and innovation. For this, we used a foresight workshop with healthcare professionals and a focus group with patients. I'm sorry, I'm just having a little bit of difficulty with the slides. Right. So coming out of our project that we've now been conducting for the last 2 years, this was a seed project. So our work was really to come to arrive at what we thought was the most important new research lines to pursue. So the main theme coming out of our project is that we believe that being more aware of the human and social aspects of artificial intelligence development might result in more easily embedded and useful medical AI. And the main question that we have as we look at AI development that incorporates a highly collaborative process and the kinds of intermingling and intertwining of different social and human aspects that come into that, we have the main question that we have is how artificial really is this artificial intelligence that is capable of being embedded in real world clinical contexts. So we've submitted the 3 articles so far. We're waiting for responses on that. And one of them looks at transparency, which we'll talk about now. One of them talks about validation. We'll talk about that one also. And in preparation, we have papers on professional expectations and patient expectations concerning AI. We'll also talk about that paper. And other papers are still in preparation. Right, our agenda for today is that we will start off with the presentation by Sally Wyatt, followed by Andy Swift, who's going to look at things from a radiological perspective, and Leah Strom, who's going to look at aspects of implementing AI in clinical practice. We have decided to group the papers together, to group 3 papers together, and then have a longer discussion time where we can range across the 3 papers. So our discussion time is 30 minutes after the 3 papers of 20 minutes each. We'll then have a break of 10 minutes, followed by another session where Pete and I will give our presentation on our project, and that will be followed then by Federico Kapitsa talking about validation, and Marianne Bowenink and Karen Danielson talking about their work with patient involvement in new technologies. So with that, I will pass it over to Pete, who will introduce Sally. What I would like to, sorry, before I go on to that, what I would like to just mention is that we are using Slido for our for the questions. You can get to Slido. The hashtag is simply hashtag AI Clinic. We'll put it in the chat. Please go and put your questions onto Slido, and we'll manage the question and answer session through the Slido. So you can just go to, we'll put the instructions in the, that it's already there. You go to www.sly.do and put in the hashtag, and you go to the question and answers there, and we will be able to conduct the question and answer session from the Slido. Right. Pete?
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Anna Maria. So session one. For the first half of the event, we begin session one with presentations from Sally Wyatt, Andy Swift, and Leah Strom, as Anna Maria just mentioned. And kicking off this event is Sally Wyatt. And Sally is a professor of digital cultures in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, Maastricht University. Her research focuses on the ways on how people use digital technologies to find health information, and on how digital technologies are incorporated into the practices and methods of social science and humanities scholars. Okay, so that's great then. So over to Sally for her presentation.
Sally, I will be sharing your slides, yes?
Either you or Pete. I don't remember.
I'm going to, I will share your slides now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you to Pete and Anna Maria for organizing this, and cannot begin to tell you how much I miss all of you when I look at the kind of list of names of the participants, and I see all sorts of old friends and people I would really, really like to see. But okay, this is what it is. I'm here to talk about a project that I'm, currently involved in, which I'll say a bit more about in a moment. But I guess this is why I'm also up first, a kind of fairly general view about AI and healthcare. Next slide, please. So this is briefly what I'm going to talk about. The only really theoretical point is in the point about the third one, about materiality. And otherwise, I'll just talk about things I find interesting and our project. Next slide, please. So, and the next one. So this is our project, which and all of my collaborators on the project, I think, are here. As I quickly looked through the names earlier, this would be the moment when I'd ask them to kind of wave and smile, but well, we'll do it differently. So it's called RAIDIO, which is a wonderful abbreviation thought up by one of my colleagues. It's a 4-year project. Can I have the next slide, please? Funded by the Dutch Research Council. They were particularly looking for projects about digitalization. And one of the other requirements was that it had to combine social sciences and humanities. And part of the project is to reflect on that kind of collaboration. So you can see here all my lovely colleagues in our completely wonderful, not gender balanced team, in case you haven't noticed already, from Maastricht University, where I'm based, together with Flora Leeson, a number of colleagues from the University of Utrecht, and Shoko Vos from Radboud. I've also mentioned a few students here where Flora and I are currently doing a kind of very small course, as you can see, with 3 excellent students, partly based on this project. And we met with them yesterday, and Megan and Yoyanaka joined us, which was also wonderful. And one of the advantages of the current circumstances that new forms of coming together are possible. Right, next slide, please. I'm sure, well, I mean, Anna Maria has already shown a couple of headlines like this. We're probably going to get more in the course of the afternoon, but our project was also kind of prompted by these sorts of claims about how AI is going to, transform healthcare in different sorts of ways, make radiologists redundant, but plus all the kind of good things about being more reliable and whatever. Next slide, please. So the main question in our project is about how AI should be used kind of and responsibly integrated in image-based medicine. We're particularly focusing on radiology and pathology. So these are our aims. I've already mentioned the final one, which I won't talk any more about right now, unless you have questions about it later. But where we're really kind of busy at the moment is to look at the digital transformations in image-based medicine, and to engage in some ethical parallel research about the role of AI in clinical decision-making. Next slide, please. Right, so this is a kind of overview of the project. For some of you present, might be a little counterintuitive to learn that the conceptual and historical work is being done by the kind of STS people in Maastricht. I mean, Flora is also an historian, so that's good. And the empirical work is being done by the ethicists in Utrecht. And we're all going to contribute to part 3. I keep trying to talk my colleagues into letting me participate in the film, but I'm not sure they're going to go for that. But that's really a responsibility of our colleagues in Utrecht, to make a film in order to kind of demonstrate some of the kind of complexities and issues that arise when using AI in clinical decision making. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through all of these questions because I can't answer them all. But if you come back in 3 years' time, when I hope we really can meet, I hope we will have some answers to these sorts of questions. But they're, given who is present, I mean, I think they're all the kinds of questions that many of us are asking ourselves anyway about, what do medical professionals think about all of this? What kind of skills are kind of being challenged when introducing AI? What would bias mean when using AI in diagnostics? Who's actually responsible when something goes wrong? Is it the clinician? Is it the radiographer? Is it the people who made the equipment? And also, I think, very interesting questions about whether medical professionals actually need to understand how this stuff works, and also what patients should or need to know about the role of AI in their treatment. So that's, yeah, as I say, 3 years from now, we can give you answers. Next slide, please. So now I'm actually really, really old. This outgrowth isn't, just roots. I really am gray and have been for a number of years, but I wasn't always old. And I can remember several waves of excitement around AI in the earlier decades. Some of them I've only read about, but some of them I was kind of there. So I'd like to, the next slide, please. And this is the interactive part. So your task is to read this slide. A couple of words have been deleted. Those are the ones with asterisks and hashtag signs. And I don't know how we're going to manage this. We had set up a little poll, but I don't know if we can manage that kind of simultaneously.
We can.
And
I'm going to just go to it.
You have to guess when this was written and what it's about. So you can start thinking. The first question is in which decade?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if everyone can go to the www.sli.do and put in the code and
Ooh, okay.
answer the.
Okay, so we'll leave that there for now, and you can try to do that because I know time is really tight. So if you manage to find it, answer the questions, and we'll see what you come up with later. Next slide, please. Okay, here we have all sorts of terms that you might have come across if you are interested in AI and healthcare. You'll have seen these in different things that you've been reading. One of the things that Flora and I are kind of working on is, sorry, I can go back to the previous slide.
It's not taking me there. I don't know why my slides get stuck.
Okay, you can remember there are all those big,
sorry, there we go. Sorry.
No problem. All those kind of words. One of the things that Flora and I are supposed to do is develop what we called in the proposal a pragmatic genealogy, which might be rather disturbing as a term to all of the historians present. But I think maybe like all genealogies and all history, they're created through the lens of the present. I mean, these terms, they come and go. Some are more prevalent in some domains than in others. I think another conclusion we can make from this is that AI and data are blue. If you look at Google Images, when you Google AI, you get things like that. The other thing to notice from these pictures is that they are largely disembodied brains in a vat. And occasionally we get hands sometimes touching God, but okay, much more to be said about that. Next slide, please. Right, I mean, Anna Maria already mentioned many of these sorts of issues in her introduction, the sorts of promises in sort of gray and the threats in red about using AI in healthcare or anywhere else. I'm not going to go through these in any detail. I just wanted to kind of flash them up at you. What I would like to show you, the next slide, is I hope you can sort of see this, something I came across recently, and I just think it's so amazing. I wanted to share it with you, but it's also a kind of reminder of the arbitrariness of classification, which I think is extremely important when we're talking about healthcare. This is an artwork based on a story by Borges, in which he classified animals differently. So animals that belong to the emperor, or animals that are embalmed, or animals that are just simply fabulous, which I think is a wonderful kind of way of kind of dealing with a very complex literature about classification. But I think this captures much of it really nicely. Next slide, please. So materiality. So again, looking at who's present, this certainly isn't going to be new to many of you, but it's certainly important in these discussions. And I'm part of national Dutch kind of discussions about artificial intelligence. And I had some meetings earlier this week when I was getting incredibly frustrated with some of the AI specialists and computer scientists who were present, because they were still very much of the brains in a vat kind of idea. So there was a sort of claim that there is no difference between artificial intelligence and the human mind. And there's a lot of things wrong with that. Next slide. The biggest thing that's wrong with it is about materiality. So back in the 90s, when I was kind of younger and around and aware, deep neural networks were the holy grail of AI, with the claim that perhaps most, if not all, cognitive achievements of people could be successfully modeled by deep neural nets. And this is an example from the neurophilosopher Churchland, who, claimed, or was wanting to claim, that neural nets could be distinguished between the sonar echoes from a rock and from a mine. And of course, this would be wonderful. We could, clear the seas of mines, because it's really difficult for people to distinguish the sonar echoes. So he begins to explain here how he would go about doing this. And you think, well, that all sounds very nice and technical and good, but there is coming to something missing. Can I have the next slide, please? So to actually be able to do this, first of all, you'd have to get yourself a ship, a crew, some instruments, some technicians, and some scientists, sail out to the middle of the ocean somewhere, set up the apparatus, position the rocks and the mines, which are actually artifacts, not real rocks and mines, which are probably covered in mollusks and seaweed and things like that, and on and on. So I think this, in some ways, is a very simple kind of example, but I think a really important kind of reminder of the materiality of AI and of many other things. So I think, one of my questions for you really is, what are the materialities of AI in clinical contexts that you might be studying? Next slide, please. Okay, and again, these are really, really preliminary. So I've already mentioned the work that Flora is doing, Flora Leeson, who's also present here, looking at the kind of history of computers and computer-related things in radiology from 1960 onwards. And as you're looking at different journals and conference proceedings, and at some point, hopefully, she'll actually be able to visit some archives. That's the post-corona next step. And she's got a couple of, next slide, please. A couple of images. These are actually from Dutch newspapers, going back a way. So from 1988, the computer teaches itself to think. There's also a medical application already in the mid-60s. Computers would kind of propose the diagnosis. And again, you can see here the same sorts of claims that Anna Maria was already mentioning and that I also mentioned earlier. Something else that Flora has found out about, but I'm not going to tell you because it would also ruin the quiz, the interactive quiz. Next slide, please. Right, the other work that's going on in Utrecht with Megan Milotta and Janneke Droogt, who are also here. They've already amazingly, we started this project in the summer. They've already managed to do a number of interviews, both in Utrecht and in Radboud University, which is in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. They've developed their kind of coding instruments and are kind of busy with that. Next slide, please. And are beginning to kind of make sense of this sort of transition from analog to digital workspaces. It was interesting to see, what Anna Maria was saying earlier about, how few real applications are kind of being used in clinical contexts. So here, Janneke and Megan have divided this up into the kind of development process, the implementation process, and future plans. And we've been discussing this, and it's really interesting to see what kinds of ideas and expectations come out of this. Next slide, which is my final substantive slide. Other interesting thing that they're coming up with is, what does this mean for medical professionals? What are their professional responsibilities? What do they think about the sort of greater use of digital technologies in their work? Do they trust them? How far are they involved in making decisions about what gets used and how? So as I said right at the beginning, come back in 3 years and we'll have a lot more detail for you. Final slide, which I think is to thank you all for your attention. I don't know if we've been able to do the kind of quiz, and if you're all desperately keen to know the answers, but maybe we can either do that in the question time or that gives you time to think about it. So thank you very much.
Sally, I think we'll go to the questions now. Thank you so much for that. Let's just go there to the Slido questions now and have a look. Let me share that screen. Sorry, I think I did not share the correct screen before. Let me just share that screen. There's so many ways that Zoom can trick you. Okay, so can you all see the Slido screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
I can see it.
There we go. There's your poll. There's the first of your polls.
Okay,
Sally.
well, the majority of you are wrong, but a substantial minority were right. It was from 1984.
Right. Okay. Should we go to the next your next question? If I can get there. Right. How do I do that? No, that was not it. Sorry, I'm rather new at
Maybe just the little arrow down there.
that's it. Yes, I was had it covered too. No, it's not going to do that. Wait, it's there. Right, there was our word cloud. And that was on the first technology and the second technology. Well, maybe people can have a look at that as we as
you now have a clue because it's you now know the year. But okay, in the interest of time, maybe I'll kind of ruin the surprise and tell you that it's about
we've got some answers.
Oh no, they're coming in now. Okay.
Right. Well, we'll maybe leave that open and let people have their guesses and come back to it. And I do remind you, I hope that you're able to, I do remind you that there is an audience question and answer, and you can pop your questions. I'm sure that there'll be lots of questions for Sally, and you can pop your questions into the Slido Q&A, and we'll take them from there.
Yeah. We already have a question from Ellen Seeley, and she wants to reserve that question for session 2 for Marianne. So thanks, Ellen.
Okay, we'll take the questions at the end of the three of the first 3 talks. So thank you very much, Sally. And I am just